good morning. Thank you for joining us. I am Lily with San Antonio Water System, and today we are here at the Blue Hole. We are with Sally Said, and Sally will be talking to us shortly about some of the history with that. But before we jump right into our topic, I want to thank you for joining us and remind you that we'd appreciate the shares. Feel free to swipe and share, and also do any comments that we would love to address any of your comments, or give us some hearts. So thanks again for joining us. Sally, thank you so much for being with us today.
Glad to be here.
Tell me a little bit about where we're at. Let's start with that.
All right. We are on land that belongs to the Sisters of Charity of the Incarnate Word, and 53 acres have been set aside as a nature sanctuary called Incarnate Word, the Headwaters at Incarnate Word. We are immediately adjacent to the university. At one time, all of the land belonged to the sisters, and they had, I think, originally 283 acres. Through the years, they had to sell land for the Olmos Dam, for the 281 entrance, and to some commercial groups, so that we have what's left. Part of it was deeded to the university. The rest remained with the sisters, and of their land, 53 acres have been set aside as a nature sanctuary.
Wow. And it is kind of tucked away, but it's beautiful out here. Before we start talking about the Blue Hole, maybe some of you, I was born and raised in San Antonio. I obviously know that, like any river, there is a starting place for the San Antonio River, but I had no idea it was right here. So do you want to bring the camera a little closer? And I think what we're seeing right here is the sisters put this wall around to kind of keep everybody safe and not falling in. Is that correct?
Well, this is the original site of the main spring of the San Antonio Springs, which was called the Blue Hole, and it has been here for thousands of years.
And it flows down there, if you can see sort of that opening there, and then you can take the camera around. It flows right into what is the beginning of the San Antonio River.
Yeah, so we have right here the headwaters of the San Antonio River, and actually the headwaters includes the something like 34 square mile catchment basin for Olmos Creek, plus this particular spring. But this particular spring is the one that's credited for being the headwaters.
Amazing. Great. So I know that it doesn't always flow, right? There's not always beautiful blue water, and I know sometimes it can be hard to see on camera, but the water is a very light shade of beautiful blue in here, hence the Blue Hole name, huh?
Well, for the most part, it always flowed until they started drilling artesian wells in about 1895 as part of the water source for San Antonio.
Sure.
And then we had a drought period from the 50s through the 70s, and another in the 90s. So anytime the Edwards aquifer level goes down below about 672 feet at a test well over here at Fort Sam, the water ceases to be pushed up. It's still there, it's still down in the aquifer, but it just is not under pressure enough to be pushed up and out into the river.
Which is what an artesian well is in essence, right? It comes up by its own pressure. So we're very fortunate that all this recent crazy rainy weather has actually brought our water table back up so that we could share this beautiful, beautiful site with you guys. Can you tell me a little bit more about the history, the importance of the Blue Hole? What would you like the audience to know about, other than it's beautiful and we have this amazing site? What's important about this?
Well, there's a lot. First of all, about 300 million years ago, this natural area was formed when the South American landmass overran the North American landmass and pushed up the Ouachita Mountains and then what became the Balcones Escarpment in Texas. And so that helped to form the geology of what is providing the water. It is that particular escarpment. It is a biological hub for the Northern Hemisphere because several climatic and biotic zones come together right here in the Olmos Basin, but specifically at the spring. Paleo-Indians inhabited this area from about, 11,000 years ago, from about 9,000 to 6,000 BC.
Okay.
We have found spear points and evidence of their hearths, burning stones and so forth, mostly over close to the Olmos Dam and mostly under what is now the Olmos Dam. But the Paleo Indians were hunting megafauna and mammoths, giant bison, giant deer, and so forth. It was at the end of the last glaciation, we call it Ice Age, but it was part of an Ice Age. And in fact, right over there, where you cannot see anymore, we found a juvenile giant bison that had been killed by the local Paleo Indians. So that would have been, 10,000 years ago or so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about history.
After that, we had archaic Indians in the region, and they had to adjust to hunting smaller animals, deer, rabbits, what have you. Were very good at processing plant life. They had grinding stones and such. They were pretty much nomadic, but they created a lot of small settlements in the area. And so this particular area that has been researched archaeologically in an extensive way, though not recently, has been set aside as the source of the river archaeological district and is on the National Register of Historic Places. So we have several protected archaeological sites covered over with a little medallion showing exactly where they are. So that's not the end, though, of the Native Americans. The ones we know the most about were in the late prehistoric period, from about 700 AD until the arrival of the Spanish. And they were small bands that traveled through here for trade purposes. Some of them had semi-permanent encampments, and we tend to call them the Coahuiltecans because they spoke dialects of a Coahuiltecan language. They had a bow and arrow. This was the first group to have acquired a bow and arrow, and that was different from the atlato, or spear thrower, that had been used by the archaic Indians previously, and of course the Paleo Indians before that. They had trade with East Texas, with the Gulf Coast, with down into Mexico. Materials that were found here came from all of those places. Most important, it was a ceremonial site, and they collected the mescal beans, or the seeds of the Texas mountain laurel, which are very toxic unless you know how to process them, but they knew how to process them and use them for hallucinogenic purposes, and they were in the process of changing over to peyote as their preferred hallucinogenic substance, their medicine. And this spring, as well as several others in the area, was a stopping point on pilgrimage from far north down through Texas to Miranda City, which is near Laredo, for gathering of peyote. And they would take water from the spring and then offer it to the peyote grounds in a way of collecting. They also had the story of Yanaguana. And Yanaguana is the name given to the river by the local Coahuiltecans, to the spring, to the town sometimes. And the story of Yanaguana was given to us by the local Coahuiltecans in an oral version that we were allowed to tell. And this is that a female leader of the group, of a band that was west of San Antonio, and very, very thirsty, very tired from travel. She split off because she saw a green area in the distance and she wanted to go investigate. And 3 times she was about ready to give up, and she heard a whistle. And to her, the whistle was the Creator telling her, keep going, keep going. And so finally she arrived at this site, and there was no water here. And then an anhinga bird appeared, which was a water turkey, which is still found in South Texas. And from out of the rock, the water started flowing, and as the bird flew down the river course, the water filled the river. And so she could drink water, take some back to her people, bring her people here. They decided this was a good place to spend some time, and they called it, her name and the spring, the upflowing water of the spirit, Yanaguana. Now, Yanaguana has become a word in the song of Native American groups, even Native American church, all over the United States, almost nobody knows what it is or where it is.
Wow.
And so the people from here go instruct them about, this is Yanaguana, this is the holy water, this is the sacred spring, this is our story, and that's why we call it Yanaguana. So that comes from that late prehistoric period. Then we have the Spanish colonial or Mexican period. And for the Spaniards could never have established the city of San Antonio without the water in the San Antonio River. That's what made it possible, and the spring made the river possible, as well as the San Pedro Springs and such. They built acequias, or irrigation ditches, we tend to think of them, but they were also ditches to carry drinking water and get them to the missions. So the missions could be built by getting water from the river and taking it to the missions, also for irrigation purposes. They were here for empire, for religious conversion, for commerce. They took the local Indians, the Coahuiltecans, and invited them into the missions, especially the Alamo, in order to provide labor for the missions and protection for the Indians from the attacking Apaches and Comanches. So it was a trade-off.
Yes.
Yeah, but during that period, this area was an encampment for soldiers, for the Spanish and then Mexican soldiers, because Mexico split from Spain. The War of 1810 finally ended in 1821. They declared their independence. So from 1821 to 1836, when Texas split off, there were Mexican soldiers that were stationed here because it protected the northern frontier from incursions by the French. And there was an old road that led off kind of toward Austin Highway that was called the Buffalo Road, because bison were the primary meat animal, bison and deer. And there was still a lot of bison around during this period. So the road where the bisons were caused the people to come camp here and then follow the bison and hunt them. But the Spaniards could use that road to get into East Texas, where they were most being threatened by France. So that was an important period. And
I'm going to just interrupt you for a second. For those of you that may have just joined us or are wondering what we're talking about, we are at the Blue Hole, talking about the history of the importance of this space, and we are with Sally Said, who is sharing a little bit of that information with us. Elizabeth, who's behind the camera right now, was giving us a little bit of a view of the water flowing. And Elizabeth, if at any point you feel the need to come back and give them a view of the Blue Hole here, feel free to disengage and come back out. So I'll let you continue, Sally.
Well, I was just going to say that the first Spaniards to come here were in 1691, but a little bit later, a Father Margil de Jesus was leading a group of priests, also very thirsty, to a river that was not flowing, said many prayers. They pulled on the root of a native grapevine. The water flowed out. And so the Catholic version of how the river was created was that Father Margil miraculously created the river by pulling it out. Probably we think what happened in both cases was one of those drought periods.
And the water table got to the right level,
and
the water started to flow.
And by moving the rocks or something, it allowed the water to come out. But anyway, do we want to hear about the Texas Rangers?
Sure.
Okay, after the 1836 War of Secession, Texas, of course, claimed the area, and they had a Texas Army, which was converted to being the Texas Rangers. And the Texas Rangers camped around here.
Wow.
And
It's been a popular site for
the whole
time.
almost basin area, but especially around here because of the springs and the water.
Yes.
And they were able to protect against raids from the Apaches and the Comanches, and also against what they feared would be raids from Mexico trying to retake the area, which mostly didn't happen, but they were protecting against the attacking Indian groups that had come down off the plains. This area right here became a commodity. Under the Anglos, the land and the water were not the sacred space we all inhabit, or were not the ejido as it was under the Spanish shared grazing lands, but rather land that could be sold. And so the city of San Antonio sold the headwaters of the river to J.R. Sweet, who built the half of the house that you see up there out of limestone, and that was in 1852. But Mr. Sweet tried to do more things with it, wasn't able, decided to sell to George Brackenridge, and he did that in 1869. And Brackenridge began converting this into a water system for the city of San Antonio until in 95 they began drilling artesian wells and discovered, aha, there's a better way to do this. We don't have to just take spring water. So the springs began drying up, of course, with all the artesian well pumping, and Brackenridge decided it was time to leave, and he sold the property to the Sisters of Charity in 1897. And the sisters have had that land since then, except for the acreage that they have had to sell off for various reasons, for the dam, for the right-of-way, for various commercial purposes to support their...
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I know we have, do you have the page, is this the page here where we've got some information? There is so much rich history that you can learn, and if you want to bring the camera on over so we can grab a good shot of that. This is where you can go to find more information about the history of the Blue Hole, and about all that is going on here. So before we wrap up, did we get any other questions we maybe didn't address? Nothing? Okay, good. I know we had a very thorough explanation, but I also know that we could probably go on for quite a bit of time, and we just wanted to bring this beautiful site and give you an idea of how lucky San Antonio is to have this. So thank you, Sally, for joining us, for sharing all of this rich history, and hope that you're able, we actually have some very patient people waiting behind us that are here to see the Blue Hole, so we hope you get to come out and see it as well and experience how spectacular it really is. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.